There are plants sitting in American gardens right now, beautiful, flowering, thriving perennials that their owners have no idea are illegal to possess. Not illegal in some vague bureaucratic sense. Illegal in the sense that federal agents have knocked on doors, issued removal orders, and in some cases, made arrests. And here is what makes this genuinely alarming. Several of these plants were sold at mainstream nurseries, promoted by the U.S. government itself, or grown freely by generations of home gardeners before the law caught up with them. Before we get to number 14, a plant so widely sold at garden centers across the South that millions of people are unknowingly breaking state law right now, I want you to hold on to this. Number 15 on this list was studied by the CIA as a potential truth serum. It grows in dry, rocky soil, produces white star-shaped flowers, and is classified as a noxious weed in multiple Western states. We will get there. If you grow plants that most people have never heard of, or if you want to understand what is actually legal to put in your soil before you plant it, subscribe to this channel. We cover the plants that other gardening channels are afraid to touch. Let us begin. Number 1. Opium Poppy, the garden catalog ghost. Papaver somniferum. For over 5,000 years, this poppy moved freely across Eurasia. Ancient Sumerian clay tablets referenced it as Hulgil, the plant of joy. Greek physicians used it. Renaissance herbalists cataloged it. Victorian cottage gardeners planted it in borders alongside roses and larkspur without a second thought. It appeared in American seed catalogs under romantic ornamental names well into the 20th century, and most buyers had no idea what they were actually growing. What traditional growers understood was that this plant was dual-natured. The blooms were extraordinary silky, ruffled petals in deep burgundy, violet and cream that opened like handfuls of crumpled silk. The seed pods, after flowering, were equally striking as dried arrangements. The seeds themselves ended up on bread loaves across Europe for centuries. For most of human history, the poppy was a garden plant that happened to have powerful medicinal applications, not the other way around. Contemporary legal classification reversed that framing entirely. The DEA now treats intentional cultivation of Papaver somniferum as equivalent to drug manufacturing because the seed pods are the direct biological source of raw opium, the base compound for morphine, heroin, and codeine. Federal penalties for cultivating with intent to harvest narcotics can reach 20 years in prison. The seeds remain technically legal to purchase. They appear in grocery stores on bread products, but the moment you plant them with documented knowledge of their narcotic content, the law considers you a drug producer. The DEA has acknowledged it does not pursue casual ornamental growers. That acknowledgement carries no legal weight. The forgetting here was not gradual. The legal reclassification was sharp and deliberate, driven by the opioid crisis and federal scheduling decisions that made the plant's ornamental history legally irrelevant. What your great-grandmother grew in her cutting garden, you cannot legally grow in yours. Number 2. Peyote Cactus, the sacred button. Lophophora williamsi. Indigenous peoples of the Chihuahuan Desert use this small, spineless cactus in ceremonial healing contexts for at least 5,000 years before European colonization introduced the concept of plant illegality to the continent. The Huichol, Tarahumara, and dozens of other native nations understood it not as a recreational substance, but as a medicinal and spiritual tool with specific ceremonial protocols governing its use. It took centuries of colonial policy to reclassify that understanding as criminal behavior. The cactus grows at a pace that challenges most gardeners' patience. In the wild, it can take 13 years to reach flowering size. Its growth rings record time the way trees do. Collectors and ethnobotanists worldwide find it biologically extraordinary. A perennial succulent that produces woolly tufts, produces pink flowers, and synthesizes mescaline, a compound that produces visionary states of consciousness that neurologists are now studying for therapeutic applications in treatment-resistant depression. Peyote is a Schedule I controlled substance under the Controlled Substances Act. Possession, cultivation, and propagation are federal crimes in all U.S. states, with one narrow religious exemption for enrolled members of the Native American Church during certified ceremonies. Texas maintains a slightly broader exemption, but it applies strictly to verified tribal members. The mescaline it produces sits in the same federal scheduling tier as heroin and LSD. Growing a single plant without exemption carries criminal exposure. Uncontrolled wild harvesting, driven precisely by the fact that cultivation is banned, has pushed wild peyote populations in South Texas close to ecological collapse, sacred, endangered, illegal. That combination may be unique in the plant world. Number 3. Coca Plant, the leaf that built an empire. Erythroxylum coca. Before cocaine existed as a concept, the coca leaf existed as food, medicine, and ceremony across the Andean highlands for at least 8,000 years. Inca laborers chewed it to work at altitude. Bolivian miners used it to suppress hunger and fatigue during brutal extraction shifts. Traditional healers prepared leaf preparations for stomach ailments, headaches, and altitude sickness. The leaf itself, in its unprocessed form, delivers mild stimulation, roughly comparable to strong coffee. Cocaine, the isolated alkaloid, is what industrial chemistry created from it in the 19th century. That distinction matters enormously, and American drug law does not make it. The DEA treats possession of the coca plant as constructive possession of a controlled substance precursor, effectively making cultivation a federal crime regardless of intent. Importing, growing, or propagating any part of the plant is a federal offense. There is one legal coca operation on American soil. The Stepan Company in Maywood, New Jersey, holds an exclusive DEA license to process decoconized coca leaf extract used as a flavoring ingredient in Coca-Cola. A single corporation holds the only legal relationship between the American legal system and this 8,000-year-old plant. Coca-Cola removed cocaine from its formula in 1903. The coca leaf never left. Number 4. Sage of the diviners, the mint that broke the internet. Salvia divinorum. Mazatec shamans in the Sierra Mazateca mountains of Oaxaca, Mexico, used this plant in nighttime healing ceremonies for generations before Western science had any record of its existence. They called it Ska Maria Pastora, the leaves of the shepherdess Mary. Access was restricted. Ceremonies were private. The knowledge of the plant stayed within the community for centuries because no outsider knew to look for it. Albert Hofmann, the Swiss chemist who accidentally discovered LSD in 1943, formally documented Salvia divinorum for Western science in the 1960s after meeting Mazatec healers. He identified it as a perennial herb in the mint family with large velvety leaves and tubular white and purple flowers. Its active compound, salvinorin A, is now recognized as the most potent naturally occurring hallucinogen ever identified, active in quantities as small as 200 micrograms. Nothing else in the plant kingdom comes close to that potency threshold. At the federal level, the DEA has not scheduled it under the Controlled Substances Act. At the state level, 29 states have independently classified it as a controlled substance, several as Schedule 1. Missouri, Oklahoma, and Delaware treat it the same as heroin from a scheduling perspective. Wisconsin imposes fines of up to $10,000 for manufacturing or selling it. Florida legalized, then banned it after viral videos of teenagers filming extreme reactions circulated online and triggered legislative panic. Grow it in the wrong state and you face felony possession, not a garden fine. The internet did in a decade what colonial suppression could not do in centuries. It extracted this plant from its ceremonial context, stripped its protocols, and turned it into a spectacle. The law followed the spectacle. If you are still watching, you already know this channel is not like the others. We do not talk about tomatoes and beginner-raised beds. We talk about the plants that come with legal consequences, historical scandals, and government cover-ups. Subscribe now so you do not miss what is coming later in this list, because number 15 involves the CIA, and I am not exaggerating. Number 5. Caught the 1,000-year social shrub, Catha edulis. Across Yemen, Ethiopia, Somalia, and Kenya, khat has functioned as a social plant for more than 1,000 years. It fills a role roughly equivalent to coffee culture in the West: afternoon gatherings, conversation, mild stimulation, shared ritual. Fresh leaves and stems are chewed slowly to release the active compounds. It is consumed communally, not privately. Yemeni weddings, business negotiations, and afternoon visits are structured around it. An estimated 90% of Yemeni men chew khat daily. During Yemen's civil war, khat markets remained operational when food markets collapsed. That is how central it is. The pharmacology is specific and important. Fresh khat leaves contain cathinone, a compound structurally similar to amphetamine that breaks down rapidly as the plant dries. The DEA classifies cathinone as a Schedule I controlled substance. Older dried plant material converts cathinone to caffeine, a Schedule IV drug. The legal problem with growing khat in the U.S. is that fresh cultivation produces the more seriously scheduled compound at harvest. There is no legal pathway for cultivation. U.S. Customs regularly intercepts khat shipments because the plant must be consumed fresh and therefore travels by air in refrigerated packaging. A plant with a millennium of documented community use sits in the same federal scheduling tier as compounds with no such history because its chemistry resembles something American pharmacology already criminalized. Number 6. Kratom, the coffee cousin they are still deciding about. Mitragyna speciosa. Thai farmers in the 19th and early 20th centuries chewed kratom leaves, the same way coca leaf was chewed in the Andes to manage fatigue during long agricultural workdays. The plant is a tropical evergreen in the coffee family, with broad, glossy, dark green leaves and small spherical flower clusters. At low doses, the leaves produce stimulation. At high doses, opioid-like sedation. That pharmacological duality made it culturally useful and commercially threatening. Thailand banned kratom in 1943, not for public health reasons, but because it was economically competing with the government's opium trade. Opium generated tax revenue. Kratom, which farmers could grow themselves for free, did not. The ban was a revenue protection decision disguised as a health measure. Thailand acknowledged this and reversed the ban in 2021. In the United States, as of 2026, kratom is not federally scheduled. It is, however, outright banned in Alabama, Arkansas, Indiana, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Wisconsin, where possession or cultivation carries criminal charges. The DEA attempted a Schedule I classification in 2016 and withdrew the proposal after unprecedented public opposition that included formal objections from members of Congress. The DEA's Drugs of Concern classification means federal scheduling remains an active possibility. 6 states currently treat it identically to heroin from a legal standpoint. The science on its safety and therapeutic potential is genuinely unresolved, which makes the legal landscape equally unresolved, and which makes growing it in a banned state a genuine legal risk regardless of your intent. Number 7. Kudzu, the government's greatest gardening mistake. Pueraria montana var. Lobata. Here is the most extraordinary origin story on this list. The U.S. government paid southern farmers to plant kudzu. The Soil Erosion Service distributed over 85 million kudzu seedlings during the 1930s and promoted the vine as a solution to widespread soil erosion following the Dust Bowl. Farmers received up to $8 per acre, significant money during the Depression, to establish it across the South. Agricultural bulletins called it a miracle forage crop. Civic groups planted it along roadsides. The Kudzu Club of America had over 20,000 members. In Japanese and Chinese traditional cooking, kudzu root starch was used as a thickening agent for centuries, and the plant was considered a valuable source of fiber, food, and herbal medicine. Its roots can extend 12 feet deep and store significant quantities of edible starch. None of that utility made it appropriate for the American South. Kudzu now covers an estimated 4 to 7 million acres across the southeastern United States, smothering forests, buildings, power lines, and entire ecosystems. By climbing over every structure and cutting off photosynthesis to everything beneath it, it grows at approximately 1 foot per day during peak season. It is listed as a federal noxious weed under the Plant Protection Act. Selling it or transporting it across state lines without a permit is a federal violation. Some states classify deliberate planting as an environmental crime. Every ecological disaster this plant has cause traces directly to a government decision made in 1935. The forgetting, in this case, was institutional, and the consequences are still being spent. Number 8. Purple loosestrife, the wildflower that is not wild, Lythrum salicaria. Pull over on almost any road in the northeastern United States in midsummer, and you will see this plant tall magenta-purple spikes rising from ditches, pond edges, and marsh borders, looking exactly like something that belongs there. It does not belong there. It has never belonged there. It arrived from Europe and Asia as a nursery ornamental in the early 19th century and spread so gradually and so beautifully that most people who see it today genuinely believe it is a native wildflower. It is a federal noxious weed. It is banned from sale, distribution, and cultivation in over 24 states. A single mature plant releases up to 2.7 million seeds per year, and its root chemistry actively inhibits the germination of competing native plants. It does not just outcompete the marsh, it chemically suppresses it. Right now, I want to pause for a moment. If this video is opening your eyes to plants you never realized were restricted or regulated, hit the like button. It tells me this kind of content is worth making. And it helps this video reach gardeners who genuinely need to know this before they plant something they will regret. And I want to know, have you ever unknowingly grown a plant that turned out to be banned or invasive in your area? Drop that story in the comments. Those conversations are always the most interesting ones this channel generates. Back to the list. Purple loosestrife was sold openly by nurseries as a reliable perennial into the 1980s. Some state agencies still intercept sterile-labeled cultivars at plant sales because sterility in ornamental plants is not always permanent, and this plant has a documented history of reverting. The door that opened when this plant arrived from European nurseries has never fully closed, which is why the regulations exist. Still here? Good, because the next 7 plants get significantly stranger. Drop a comment right now telling me which plant on this list you had no idea was illegal, because based on what I am seeing in other gardening communities, at least one of these is sitting in someone's yard within a mile of where you are sitting. Subscribe if you want to keep getting content that the algorithm does not exactly love us for making. Number 9. Myrtle spurge, the blue-green betrayal, Euphorbia mercenites. The Western landscaping industry fell in love with this plant for completely understandable reasons. Low-growing, drought-tolerant, architectural. With spiraling blue-green leaves and vivid chartreuse yellow flower bracts, in early spring it checked every box for low-maintenance xeriscaping in the arid West. Colorado nurseries promoted it enthusiastically through the 1990s and early 2000s. Garden centers stocked it widely. Landscapers installed it across thousands of Front Range properties. Colorado then banned it. The Colorado Department of Agriculture classified it as a noxious weed, and its sale or cultivation became a civil violation with mandatory removal orders. Beyond its invasive spread into native grassland and foothill habitats, the plant produces a milky white latex sap that causes severe skin blistering and eye damage on contact, and is toxic if ingested. Children and pets have been seriously injured by it in landscaped yards. State agriculture officials can legally order property owners to remove it at the owner's expense. Because the promotion came first and the ban came later, thousands of Colorado gardens still contain it. Owners have no idea. That gap between what was sold and what is now legal is where most plant law violations happen, not from malice, but from outdated information persisting in established beds. A plant promoted as the answer for dry slopes became, without changing a single leaf, a regulated invasive species requiring professional removal. Number 10. Wild sugarcane, Cannes grass, the bioenergy dream that became a federal crime, Saccharum spontaneum. Plant scientists studying bioenergy crops in the early 21st century looked seriously at this grass. It grows 9 feet tall. It produces more biomass per acre than almost any other non-crop plant. Its feathery silver-white plumes look otherworldly. And its root network is almost indestructible fire-adapted, drought-resistant, capable of regenerating from fragments after what would destroy most grasses. That indestructibility is precisely why it sits on the USDA Federal Noxious Weed List. Saccharum spontaneum is a wild ancestor of commercial sugarcane. Breeders deliberately hybridized it with cultivated varieties to improve disease resistance, meaning its genetics are embedded in the sugarcane, producing billions of dollars of sugar annually. The plant itself, however, is federally prohibited from cultivation in the United States without special authorization. Its rhizome network colonizes wetlands and riverbanks with a completeness that eliminates native species. It is fire-adapted in a way that allows it to thrive after burns while killing the fire-sensitive native plants competing with it. Hawaiian wetland systems have experienced documented ecological collapse from its spread. A plant whose DNA feeds the world's sugar supply cannot legally grow in your backyard. That contradiction sits at the center of how agricultural science and conservation policy have never learned to speak the same language. Number 11. Chacruna, the Supreme Court shrub, Psychotria viridis. Amazonian indigenous communities have used this evergreen shrub in ceremonial healing contexts for centuries, always in combination with the Banisteriopsis caapi vine, to brew ayahuasca, a preparation used in structured, supervised ritual contexts for diagnosis, healing, and community cohesion. The knowledge of how to prepare and guide these ceremonies was specialized, transmitted across generations, and embedded in a sophisticated understanding of plant chemistry that Western pharmacology is only beginning to formally document. The leaves of Psychotria viridis contain N-dimethyltryptamine DMT, a Schedule I controlled substance under the Controlled Substances Act. The raw plant occupies a legal gray zone. You can legally own the shrub in most of the U.S. You cannot legally prepare and consume what it contains. That line has not stopped federal authorities from arresting people at customs who import it with documented ceremonial intent. Growing it with any evidence of intent to extract or brew DMT constitutes federal drug manufacturing. In 2006, this plant was central to a United States Supreme Court case, Gonzalez v. First. O Centro Espírita Beneficente União do Vegetal, in which the court ruled in favor of a Brazilian religious sect's right to use ayahuasca in U.S. ceremonies. It remains the only instance in American legal history where a plant-linked Schedule I substance generated a successful Supreme Court religious freedom exemption. A 12-foot tropical shrub from the Amazon forced a constitutional clarification at the highest court in the land. Number 12. Japanese knotweed. The Victorian ornamental that destroys property values. Rhaenutria japonica, Fallopoeia japonica. Victorian plant collectors considered it a prize. When Philipp Franz von Siebold introduced it to Europe from Japan in the 1840s, it received a gold medal from the Society of Agriculture and Horticulture of Utrecht. Its hollow bamboo-like stems, enormous shield-shaped leaves, and cascading cream-white flower clusters made it one of the most fashionable ornamental perennials of the era. European and American estate gardens installed it deliberately. What no one understood was the root architecture beneath it. The rhizome network of a mature Japanese knotweed colony can extend 20 feet deep and 65 feet laterally from the visible plant. Fragments as small as half an inch of root generate entirely new colonies. Attempting to control it by cutting or mowing actively spreads it by distributing viable fragments. It penetrates concrete foundations, breaches basement walls, and compromises drainage infrastructure. In the United Kingdom, mortgage lenders now routinely decline loans on properties where knotweed is present on or near the land. That precedent is beginning to appear in American property transactions. USDA APHIS regulates it as a federal pest. Multiple states ban or heavily restrict it. Professional treatment using approved herbicides across multiple growing seasons is the only reliably documented control method. The plant Victorian gardeners paid good money to acquire is now the plant that can make a home legally unmortgageable. 3 plants left. The last one will reframe everything you just heard. If this video has been worth your time so far, subscribe before it ends, because this channel covers exactly this kind of content every week, and most people only find us by accident. Do not lose us in your feed. Number 13. Japanese barberry, the Lyme disease landscape shrub, Berberis thunbergii. For decades, this thorny mounding shrub with small burgundy leaves, tiny yellow flowers, and brilliant red winter berries, was among the most commonly sold landscaping plants in the northeastern United States. Garden centers stocked it, landscapers specified it, homeowners used it to line driveways and frame front yards from Maine to Maryland. Its compact, adaptable nature made it seem like a genuinely useful ornamental. Then the research connecting it to Lyme disease emerged. Studies documented blackleg tick densities up to 4 times higher inside Japanese barberry thickets compared to surrounding native vegetation. The shrub creates dense, humid microenvironments with stable temperatures that are nearly ideal for tick population establishment and survival. In the northeastern states where Lyme disease transmission rates are highest, the most popular landscaping shrub was functioning as a tick incubation habitat planted deliberately by homeowners across millions of properties. Massachusetts, New York, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Pennsylvania have banned or heavily restricted it. Other states are in active regulatory review. The same berberine compound that makes the plant mildly toxic in quantity is now studied in pharmaceutical research for antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory properties. What was sold as a carefree ornamental hedge was simultaneously reshaping the disease ecology of the American Northeast, one landscaped yard at a time. Number 14. Mexican Petunia, the band beauty that sells in plain sight, Ruellia simplex. Drive through any southern neighborhood in summer, and you will see this plant in yard after yard, tubular violet-blue flowers, covering a vigorous perennial from spring until frost, growing in full sun. Part shade, standing water, drought, poor soil, and complete neglect. It is sold at big box garden centers across the Gulf Coast. It is featured in low-maintenance landscaping guides. And in Florida, planting it is illegal. Ruellia simplex holds a Category I invasive species classification in Florida, the most severe designation the state issues, reserved for plants that have demonstrated documented alteration of native plant communities and measurable reduction of biodiversity. It spreads through 2 simultaneous mechanisms: explosive seed dispersal that projects seeds several feet from the parent plant, and aggressive underground rhizome expansion. It forms monocultures in natural areas, waterway margins, and roadsides, displacing the native plant communities that support Florida's native wildlife. The Florida Department of Agriculture issues fines for planting it. Texas and other Gulf Coast states apply their own restrictions. The plant is named after Jean de la Ruelle, personal physician and herbalist to King Francis I of the 16th century. A plant that carries the name of a Renaissance royal botanist is banned as an ecological criminal across the American South. Millions of people are growing it right now, without any awareness that the law considers their flower bed a violation. Number 15. Syrian rue, the CIA's forgotten weed, Paganum harmala. This is where the list arrives at something that will genuinely change how you think about what is growing in disturbed soils along roadsides, in vacant lots, and across dry rangeland in the American West. Syrian rue is a low, bushy, perennial herb from the steppes of Central Asia and the Mediterranean. Feathery, deeply divided leaves, white, star-shaped flowers. Seed capsules filled with deep reddish-brown seeds that have been used as a red textile dye across the Middle East and Central Asia for centuries. The dye appears in traditional Persian carpets. The seeds were burned as incense in pre-Islamic and Islamic ritual traditions across North Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. Traditional medicine communities in Morocco, Afghanistan, Turkey, and Iran used it for conditions ranging from fever to parasitic infection. The seeds contain harmine and harmaline beta-carboline alkaloids that function as monoamine oxidase inhibitors, the same class of compounds responsible for making ayahuasca's DMT orally active. When combined with any plant containing DMT, Syrian rue produces a potent psychoactive brew. Beyond its neurochemical profile, it is significantly toxic to livestock, causing potentially fatal neurological damage in sheep and cattle that graze on it in western rangelands. Nevada, Montana, and several other western states list it as a noxious weed, making its cultivation and spread legally regulated. It colonizes disturbed arid soils with persistence and spreads steadily through western rangelands, outcompeting native dryland plant communities. Here is what elevates this plant above every other entry on this list. In the 1920s, harmin, the primary alkaloid in Peganum harmala, was named telepathin by researchers who genuinely believed it had the capacity to facilitate telepathic experience. That belief was not fringe. It was serious enough that during the Cold War, the CIA included harmin in its classified MK-Ultra adjacent research program investigating pharmacological truth serums. The program explored whether harmin could compel truthful disclosure under interrogation. The research was eventually abandoned in favor of other compounds. The documentation was classified and only partially declassified decades later. A plant that grows in disturbed soil along Nevada roadsides, spreads through dry rangeland, produces seeds used to dye carpets for centuries, and is classified as a noxious weed in multiple states, was once on a classified CIA research list. It has been on Earth far longer than the legal categories we apply to it, and it will be there long after those categories change again. The plants that humans have grown, eaten, revered, and traded for thousands of years do not always align neatly with the laws of the country you live in today. That is the core truth this list keeps returning to. Not that the laws are always wrong, but that they exist, they vary by state, and they affect what you can legally put in your soil right now. This week, before you buy anything new for your garden, spend 15 minutes checking your state's noxious weed list and invasive species registry. It is free, it is searchable, and it may surprise you. The list in your state is almost certainly longer than you expect. If this video gave you information you did not have before, hit the like button. It matters more than most people realize for getting this content to gardeners who need it. Leave a comment telling me which plant on this list genuinely surprised you the most. And subscribe to this channel if you want to keep receiving content that covers the plants, the laws, and the growing practices that most gardening channels never touch. The garden is more complicated than the seed catalogs suggest. This channel exists because you already know that.